This cassette is part of an audio program that records the famous Chautauqua Morning Lecture, a 120-year-old tradition. We take you now to Chautauqua, where today's program is about to begin.
So we move immediately to the presentation of our lecturer, and we're simply delighted to have Helen Thomas with us today. She has been with UPI since 1943 and began in 1960 service at the White House covering President Kennedy. And it was during this White House assignment that Helen Thomas began closing presidential press conferences, as we all know. Thank you, Mr. President, a custom that continues to this day. My staff makes that statement every day to me, hoping that it will conclude matters. It rarely works. Ms. Thomas is a journalist of firsts, so to speak. She was the only print journalist, for example, who traveled with then-President Nixon to China during his breakthrough trip in January of 1972. She served as president of the Women's National Press Club. She was the first woman officer of the National Press Club after it opens its doors to women members following a 90-year span of all-male membership. She became the first woman officer of the White House Correspondents Association. She became the first woman member of the Gridiron Club, a 90-year-old institution in Washington, and was in 1976 designated as one of the 25 most influential women in America, a person who has influential women in America. Anyway, she is a woman who has contributed beautifully to her career, has brought great levels of understanding to the American public of life in the White House, and she is here this morning to share some of those insights with her. Please give a warm Chautauqua welcome to Helen Thomas.
It's always hard to hear your obituary when you think you're still alive, and you don't know the times I've wanted to say, no thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I'm very honored to be here at this historic forum where so many interesting people have spoken and spread their wisdom in the past and present. For myself, I'm happy to be playing hooky from Washington, from the Washington sauna bath. Not so bad here, is it? And don't feel too guilty, since the president has gone off to rest and relax in the wilds of Wyoming to view the beauties of the Grand Tetons at Jackson Hole, far from the madding crowd. When he returns to Washington, he will face many problems again with the Republican-dominated Congress, which wants to make a revolutionary change in the way Washington does business. The thesis on Capitol Hill today is that 50 states can do a better job on less money. It's interesting the way politicians who die to go to Washington try to get there by knocking the nation's capital, which should be, we always hope, an honored place. There's no question that the country is in a state of major change, particularly in the drive to complete the Reagan Revolution. Every man for himself, social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, and programs that were born of a need to broaden up opportunity for the less fortunate are under attack and being defunded. The Republican-led Congress has a mission to destroy the remaining holdover programs, last vestiges of the New Deal and the Great Society, programs that were designed to give all Americans the right to vote and to put that floor beyond which people in this country do not lack for medicine or food or shelter in this country. Right now are targeted the schoolwork programs, AmeriCorps, direct college loans for students without the banks and insurance companies intervening, and other training programs. Well, cry, the beloved country. In business, we see an astonishing trend toward greed and unconscionable profits, with thousands being laid off at the altar of downsizing and bean counting. Business section of the New York Times the other day had a headline: MCI reports 21% profit, 7% plans to cut 7% of the staff, 2,500 workers. And all the while, wages have remained stagnant for 2 decades now. There was a cartoon showing President Clinton saying, as he always does lately, "Since I took office, 8 million new jobs have been created." A waiter is standing by holding a tray with 3 glasses on it, and the waiter is saying under his breath, "Yeah, and I have 3 of them." The caring society, which we once were, seems to be lost on the lawmakers of today. President Clinton told me in a recent interview that even his bad days were good. But I must say that if I had been in the Clintons over the past few weeks, I would have stayed in bed, considering the investigations of Waco, Whitewater, Bosnia, all this, and heaven too. All this would seem to take its toll. Add to that some 8 or 10 Republican wannabes who are running for president and believe that 1996 is their year to take the White House. The confidence, perhaps properly, stems from last November when the Democrats took a bath at the polls. So while the president looks for common ground, there is precious little of it between the 2 parties now. In the end, it will depend on where people stand, whether they have swung to the right or moved to the middle. The federal government is an easy target, of course, and the Republicans are insisting that the state governments, granted with an overload now, but with block grants that can deal with the social ills. But one wonders whether fairness will prevail across the board if that's the case. There's also the trend to privatize or deregulate long-cherished federal government functions that seem to have worked in the past, although others would call them a failure. I don't think anything fails when you get to vote or when you get to eat, go to school. We saw what deregulation did to the savings and loan industry. We paid through the nose to back up the public trust, our promise, with paying $500 billion in the debt. And we saw what deregulation did for the airlines. Try to get from here to there. Speaker Newt Gingrich's contract with America has had a wide resonance with the current crop of congressmen and women. They came in to clean up, cut down big government and Washington. Well, that's not surprising. What is surprising is the deafening silence from those who will suffer the most from the cuts: food stamps, welfare, Medicare. But cheer up, all is not lost. The election is only a year and a half away. The nation is going to have to live with extreme partisanship, even though politics used to be known as the art of compromise, and people were allegedly tired of gridlock. The president is a man who hates confrontation. He never had the traditional honeymoon that's usually granted presidents, about 2 weeks. Trouble stalks him even when he has put over long-needed programs. But lately he is finding it important to take strong positions, as in the case of affirmative action, banning cigarettes for teenagers, and always gun control in a society that seems to be out of control. With all the Republicans moving to the right, Clinton also has taken positions that he hopes will give him a more conservative look, such as prayer in the schools. In fact, the president seems to be putting his own political staff in limbo as he seeks the advice of a Republican strategist by name Dick Morris, who is an old friend and who helped him win gubernatorial races in Arkansas. One of Clinton's first moves in that direction was to repudiate the past and to come out in favor of a balanced budget in 9 years. He reduced it from 10 to 9, 3 years, 2 or 3 years longer than the Republican plan for a balanced budget. And the GOP hailed his move and saying that he had finally seen the light. But some of his Democratic Party lieutenants thought it was a prescription for disaster in view of the programs that would have to be cut to meet those targets. Can't beat them, join them. No one ever said that the president is not a pragmatist at heart. All of them, in fact. So the virtual reality in Washington these days is the shift of power from the White House to Capitol Hill, where the president has to have even defended his relevancy. The Republicans are in the driver's seat, see no reason to play ball at this time. The way the game is played has come into question, some question, however. When a senator tells the president he should not come to his state without a bodyguard, he's not only insulting the president alone, but the presidency and the country. And the speaker said that the Clintons... Thank you. Speaker said that the Clintons do not represent normal Americans. Senator Dole said he's not my commander-in-chief. On so many domestic issues, there is a tug of war. And all of it boils down to how one sees the federal government. Surely so many in Washington today consider their government the enemy. For others, the government is the savior when it comes to their health and safety, not to mention the disasters that hit communities when only the federal government has the resources. Oklahoma City, earthquake in San Francisco, and so forth, but much more than that, has the resources to handle the situation. Lincoln said that government should do for people what they cannot do for themselves. The first 100 days of the new Republican regime had the GOP going like gangbusters, and they're saying, you ain't seen nothing yet. Well, Senator Dole is the front runner in the GOP polls, and others are saying that it's his to lose. Dole has embraced lifting the ban on 19 assault weapons. 650 weapons are allowed on the American streets. Wiping out affirmative action, which he knows brought women, blacks, Hispanics into the job picture for once. Dispensing and lifting the arms embargo against Bosnia. And now, if the president vetoed that bill, but if it was overridden, then Dole and Helms will come forth seeking legislation for $100 million for Bosnia to buy arms and to train them and to get more involved. Cutting down on meat and poultry inspection in the age of E. coli. A columnist recently commented that Dole, seeking the approval of the far right, has changed everything but his name. He has even said, you want me to be Ronald Reagan? Smile a lot, I'll be Ronald Reagan. I'll be anything you want. As you know, he has picked up the cudgels against X-rated and violent movies. In short, he is doing everything he can to win over the conservatives, who still view him as a Johnny-come-lately, not the true believer that is, say, like Patrick Buchanan. Well, everything isn't politics in Washington today, but almost. In many ways, these days have been compared to the Reagan Revolution of 1981. You remember those good old days when ketchup was called a vegetable on the school lunch menu? Actually, the Gingrich blitz to overturn the past and to make ours a lean, mean government is moving ahead. Oftentimes, those who rail against government the most want so much to be a part of it. Senator Phil Gramm, another candidate who also aspires to the presidency, would like to wipe out most of the social programs, and yet his childhood has been marked by all the social programs. He was a recipient of the Veteran Orphans Benefits, not to mention government scholarships, subsidized teaching posts. And he has been on the receiving end. He also received, I thought I'd just mention it, 5 deferments in the Vietnam War. The Republican majority leader in the House, Dick Armey, says he dreads the day when he's 65 and has to register for Medicare. Meantime, in Washington, under fire are the agencies that are designed to protect the health and safety of the people, including the Food and Drug Administration, OSHA, Occupational Safety, EPA, the environment. And then there is the subject of health care reform. The Clinton plan was doomed, a debacle, to put it mildly, easily targeted by the health industry, which paid $46 million for TV ads. Harry and Louise scared the hell out of everybody. But out of the ashes, lessons have been learned. And there will be some incremental benefits, such as probably an easing of restrictions on pre-existing illness and portability. If you lose your job, you're able to move your insurance. If nothing else, the President and Mrs. Clinton did raise the threshold of awareness of some 35 to 40 million persons in this country who don't have health insurance. But the President's still wondering about the woman who told him that she didn't want the government messing around with her Medicare. The Clintons are the first to acknowledge their many mistakes and miscalculations in the healthcare field. They blew it, to put it mildly. President Clinton has a Nixonian never-give-up philosophy. It took him some time in the top office of the land to become more focused. Well, somewhat. He still operates on what we've all come to know as Clinton Standard Time. He is in a reactive state by necessity, just doesn't have the votes. By now, it's pretty clear he's no give 'em hell Harry Truman. He is more in the tradition of Lyndon Johnson's favorite prophet Isaiah, the biblical quotation, "Come, let us reason together." And for all that, we know that compromise is necessary in a democracy. Way to go. We also know that in this country, we are our brother's keeper. No man is an island, but Clinton is an eternal optimist, and like Dickens' Macabre, he is certain something will turn up. In the aftermath of the GOP landslide last fall, he had to do a lot of soul searching, wondered why the defeat was so big, and he consulted with those motivational gurus that you see on television. The First Lady sought the counsel of gossip columnists. Well, any port in a storm. On the other hand, it wasn't easy to take with the pundits counting him out only after only 2 years in office, calling him a lame duck. Furthermore, members of his own party flirted with the idea of challenging him. But Clinton has resilience to ride out the storm, and his polls have gone up compared to those early days. On the plus side, he has had several successes in helping to revive the economy. He also has gotten a number of bills through Congress, not so publicized, including the Family Medical Leave Bill, the Motor Voter Bill, National Service Act, Goals 2000 Education Act, Brady Gun Control Bill, the Anti-Crime Bill, NAFTA, and he has erased a number of irrelevant regulations from the books, by reinventing governments, so-called. But all along the way, the president has been plagued by what has been called the trust factor. His appointments have been marked by the fact that no one is perfect. There is also the perception that he will not stick to his core values when push comes to shove. On foreign policy, Clinton has made a great contribution to the Middle East peace process, moving it along, sticking with it despite great obstacles, and he has certainly supported and been very instrumental in the establishment of democracy, the end of apartheid in South Africa, democracy in Haiti, pushing for reconciliation in Northern Ireland. He also has been a prime mover in seeking to denuclearize the world. In the case of Bosnia, he heeded American wishes not to send any ground troops to that Balkan disaster, which is in the backyard of the European powers. But for the U.S. to be a leader in the world, much depends on its power. So inevitably, the U.S., by definition, is getting more deeply involved. And as the world watches the heartbreaking scenes of Bosnians, Serbs on one hand, and afterwards the pushing the Muslims out, and now the Serbs pushing the Croats pushing the Serbs out. All of them inflicting their horrific ethnic cleansing on one another. Well, it's showdown time in Bosnia. Next few weeks will determine whether the United Nations, which is only as good as its members, is able to bring about peace in that benighted country. U.S. lacks the power there because people did not want to go once more into the breach. We've been there, done that. All along, it's been a lose-lose situation, however. If Clinton had his way, he would have kept foreign affairs on the back burner and concentrate on the home front. But time and tide waits for no man, especially an American president who is expected to lead, especially as the leader of the only superpower left in the world. Well, sometimes this president seems to be standing alone. That's not a bad place to be if you're standing on principle or trying to hold back a bad dawn. Meantime, the pollsters say that the people, that is, white men, are angry against taxes, angry against immigrants, angry against social programs, angry against gun control, angry against affirmative action. Down with the melting pot. Most of the anger, much of the anger against the president is visceral, extremist, inexplicable, easy to hate apparently, aided and abetted by talk show hosts who take pot shots at him every day to a very receptive audience. Well, Truman said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. There's no question that the heat has been turned up with relentless scrutiny of public officials. For all that, there is a brighter side. We are at peace. Reason seems to be prevailing in many parts of the world. Democracy is spreading, and if you've lived long enough, we have seen our worst enemies become our best friends. So why try? And yet now in Bosnia we see man's inhumanity to man again. Well, the Cold War is over. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that the Soviet Union would break up into 15 separate countries and that communism, except for some holdouts, China, Cuba, North Korea, would fade so fast? Democracy is the ideal, and we must remain a beacon light for the rest of the world. But it won't be that if we divide along the lines of rich and poor, black and white. As for presidents, well, it's easy to cite the cliches, but in the clinches, it always pays to have integrity, unshakable principles, grace under pressure, and a sense of humor. Most presidents, and I must say that both Reagan and Kennedy had that sense of humor. Most presidents, however, agree with Harry Truman. If you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Or that late pundit Eric Sevareid, who said that the presidential election system gives the winner too much to handle and the loser too much to bear. No one said it would be easy. Senator Dole accused Hillary Clinton of taking a cheap shot when she pointed out that the senators and their cohorts in the House pay about $100 a month for their health insurance, while we pay for each of them $300 or $400 a month. So the important thing is to stay healthy or run for public office. The president has made world trade a top priority to spur U.S. business opportunities, even to telling Japan that trade is a two-way street. But every time someone gets a job in this country, Alan Greenspan, the Fed chairman, raises the interest rates. And it's a fact that wages have been stagnant, as I said. Workers have lost out on the benefits with the takeovers, mergers, state-of-the-art technology. For Clinton, there have been also personal tribulations, the unending Whitewater investigation, a sexual harassment suit. His cabinet officers have been demonized by their pasts. The New York Times said in a profile some time ago that Clinton's past stalks him like a single-minded mugger, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It took this White House too long to come off of its shakedown cruise, and the president learned that something 20, something 30 is fine for a campaign, enthusiasm, energy, but not old enough or experienced enough to run the world. And when he's gotten into an image jam or scrape with falling polls, Clinton has gone to the Republican pros, David Gergen, and now, as I said, his Republican strategist, who is masterminding his re-election campaign. Of course, life was easier when we had one superpower enemy rather than the Pandora's box of today. And because he hesitates to use force and he doesn't have a macho manner, the president is often viewed as wishy-washy or waffler who marches to an uncertain drummer. Well, many presidents have chafed under the heavy burden, much as they covet the highest office in the land. But in the end, history always seems to deal with them in a much more kindly light, as in the case of Richard Nixon. And Clinton has miles to go before he sleeps. In the scheme of things, the First Lady does have a big say in many areas at the White House. She is viewed as powerful in her influence, formidable to the staff, but her husband is her proud partner, and he does seek her advice. Far from banishing her to the kitchen, she is often his mentor. These days, she has been on target on Capitol Hill, and she has been keeping her head down. The White House read the election returns last fall. It didn't send her into exile, but definitely low-keyed her. So there is a public image change, and she is becoming more of the traditional First Lady, since her in-your-face approach irritated a lot of those who still think that First Ladies should be seen and not heard. Mrs. Clinton did take some interest in the household. She fired the French chef and put broccoli on the menu. She's been astonished at the interest in her hairdos, ever-changing, and her wardrobe. So what else is new? Eleanor Roosevelt once quipped, "Sometimes I feel like I'm dressing the Washington Monument." As for the rest of the household, well, rest assured, Chelsea has her privacy, goes to a private school, not bothered by us or harassed. And when the White House was asked if Chelsea's cat, Socks, was male or female, the reply came back, "It's classified information." Top secret. So what's wrong? Well, call it naivete or whatever. but the president has really been astonished at the cynicism, skepticism, scrutiny that he has encountered in Washington. Of course, there's no such thing as an instant president, and they all have to learn the hard way, and they all have to take their lumps. Still, presidents should know, as reporters always do, that you're only as good as your last story. Mrs. Clinton said that her first 100 days in the White House were like 100 years. And on another occasion, she said, it's lonely in the bunkers. But for all that, Clinton says that Clinton really has come to enjoy the perks of the office: instant helicopters, Air Force One, which is a flying hotel. Every wish is a command. And all of it designed to make him think he's really president. And when such men moan about their lack of privacy, one can only wonder, where have they been? So many presidents have groaned about their lack of privacy in the White House. Actually, there's lots of privacy in the White House, which is so heavily guarded. Even in this, they surely do, and they find places to go, golf course and so forth, or in their private family quarters. Well, even in this new world disorder, we do know that peace is wonderful, war is hell. And we should know, as we head into the 21st century, that we can look back on many glorious achievements. We landed on the moon. We're going to Mars. We've made great breakthroughs in civil rights, equal rights, human rights. We also have made tremendous strides in high tech. We're robotized, computerized, faxed. But we also know that we have to look back on 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, to know that so many made the ultimate sacrifice for us in this century that we might remain a free people. Well, President Clinton shook President Kennedy's hands when he came with Boys Nation to the Rose Garden in 1963, and he decided then and there that he wanted to be president. I shook President Kennedy's hand in 1963, and I never thought I'd be president. I guess I lacked that vision thing. Well, Clinton has never met a hand he didn't want to shake. He wants to be loved. He chafes at White House restrictions. The president has been true, however, to have a cabinet that does have the look of America, with blacks, Hispanics, women. As you know, the president is a great jogger, and we don't run with him, but we do ride in the motorcades, we ride in vans, and every once in a while we jump out of the van, ambush him, throw a question, jump back into the van. He can run, but he can't hide. President Bush used to invite my younger colleagues to go running with him. Better them than me. I got invited to the dedication of the horseshoe pit. The president came into office with a big chip on his shoulder against the media. And in those early bad days, a Clinton aide accused us of wanting to know everything. He called us voyeurs and said we even wanted to see Clinton in his bathrobe. Well, after seeing Clinton in his running shorts, I'll pass. We in the press know that we are not loved. To be respected might be asking too much of those who want to kill the messenger who brings the bad news. But we believe in following the truth wherever it leads us. Our mission is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Incidentally, the presidential news conference is indispensable because, believe it or not, it's the only institution in our society where a president can be questioned on a regular basis and held accountable for what he does, what he thinks. There is the widespread perception that the press has somehow co-opted the First Amendment as its private preserve. Well, that's not true. What is true We are its greatest defenders because we know it is the amendment from which so many blessings flow. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition. I'm often asked how I prepare for a formal news conference. Well, first I go to the hairdresser. Your friends and your family don't care what you ask, but they want to be sure you're well groomed. I've always felt greatly privileged to cover the White House and to have a ringside seat to instant history. We know it's not easy at the top, but we also know that we do not put them on pedestals to be icons. Secrecy is a big-ticket item in any administration. It's endemic. But in my book, all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to the Oval Office, and the buck does stop there. I've often thought that everyone is on camera today. Everyone is wired. So if you want to run for public office, you should decide at the age of 5 and live accordingly. I've also come to think that when you become president, you should forget that you ever had a friend or a relative. You'll be doing them a favor as they go off to jail. As you can see, irreverence is the way we play this game, and I don't waste my sympathy on presidents because I think that they have the greatest honor that can come to anyone, and that is the trust of the American people. I am reminded of a Christmas day in Plains, Georgia, when we were watching President Carter play on the front porch with his grandchildren, and he was obviously playing for the cameras. His youngest son, Jeff, walked over to us, and a cameraman said to him, "Don't you feel sorry for your dad, the burdens, the press always watching him?" "No," Jeff said, "he asked for it." Well, no president has ever liked the press, dating back to George Washington. I wasn't covering him, but some people might think so. Kennedy said, "I'm reading more and enjoying it less." What LBJ said is unprintable. Nixon looked up when we walked into the cabinet room and he said, "It's only coincidental that we're talking about pollution when the press walks in." Carter always seemed to be saying, "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And when the Sandinistas, the Marxists, fired on a press helicopter near the Honduran border, Reagan said, "There's some good in everyone." And when Clinton was asked why the press always followed him when he went jogging, he laughed and said, "They just want to see if I drop dead." That's true. I have many memories in covering the White House. There have been times to laugh, times to cry, times to wonder. I remember when John F. Kennedy said in an off-the-cuff remark at a news conference, "Life is unfair." And I remember when LBJ invited us to the LBJ Ranch for dinner, and Bill Moyers, who had been a Baptist minister, then was his press secretary. He asked Moyers to say grace. Moyers bent his head, began to pray. Johnson commanded, "Speak up, Bill." "I wasn't talking to you, Mr. President," Moyers replied. And I remember when Martha Mitchell said, "Politics is a dirty business." And then there was the rabbi who said at the Martin Luther King March on Washington in 1963, that the greatest sin of all in the Nazi era was silence. And I remember LBJ saying that any time a politician told him, "I'm just a country boy," he reached in his back pocket to see if a wallet was still there. And I remember when we went to Moscow with Ronald Reagan, suddenly the evil empire was no more in Reagan's eyes, and he noted that the Russians laughed and they cried and they were human. When we got back to Washington, I said to him, "Mr. President, do you think maybe if you had gone to Moscow 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you might have found out that they laugh, they cry, and they're human. No, he said, they've changed. I remember when Gerald Ford said that if God had created the world in 6 days, on the seventh day he could not have rested. He would have had to explain it to Helen Thomas. And I hope I would have been asking my favorite question, why? And I remember 3 years ago when the Washington Post said that General Colin Powell was going to be Clinton's Secretary of State. And on that very day, I was invited to a party, Christmas party at Sam Donaldson's, and Powell was there. In my usual shy way, I walked up to him and I said, General, are you going to be the next Secretary of State? To which he turned to another guest and said, isn't there some war we can send her to? Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I remember Mitch Costanza, who said, I don't mind Carter being born again, but did he have to come back as himself? And I remember when those dark clouds of the Iran-Contra scandal hung over the White House, Reagan said, I've been shot, had colon cancer, skin cancer, prostate surgery. Those were the good old days. And then there was my all-time favorite, Miss Lillian, Carter's mother, who said, sometimes when I look at my children, I wish I'd remained a virgin. On the day that Carter was elected, a reporter went up to Miss Lillian and said, aren't you proud of your son? She said, which one? And I remember interviewing Miss Lillian in Plains, Georgia in 1976, and she was still fuming over a French woman correspondent who had interviewed her a couple of days before and who had belabored Carter's campaign promise never to lie. She kept asking Miss Lillian, well, what do you mean by that, and so forth. Finally, she said to Miss Lillian, do you lie? Miss Lillian said, well, might tell a little white lie. Well, what do you mean by a little white lie? In total exasperation, Miss Lillian said, do you remember when you came through that door and I told you how beautiful you looked? Well, that's that's a little white lie. And then there was Henry Kissinger, man with a mammoth ego. A woman ran up to him and said, oh, Dr. Kissinger, thank you for saving the world. He said, you're welcome. When Kissinger teased his Secret Service agents that he might be kidnapped by terrorists, they told him, don't worry, we'll never let them take you alive. I always think of newspapers as shared pain, sometimes shared horror. Justice Brandeis said that a constant spotlight on public officials lessens the possibility of corruption. He also said that if the government becomes a lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for the law. Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. In the mantel in the state dining room at the White House, below a magnificent portrait of Lincoln, is a prayer by John Adams which says, may only honest and wise men live here. We all hope for that, and I believe that people can handle the truth, and they deserve no less. I also believe that we should keep an eye on presidents who have life and death power over all humanity today to keep the people informed, democracy alive. Thank you.